Viva Las Vegas. The presidential nominees debate there tonight. One likely topic, reshaping the Supreme Court. Fighting for Mosul. Civilians flee as the U.S. helps force ISIS out of Iraq's second largest city. McVatican? McDonald's cooks up controversy around the corner from St. Peter's. And a brash new tactic, embracing the term anti-abortion for the pro-life cause. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, October 19th, 2016. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton get one last chance tonight to challenge each other face to face. Our chief White House correspondent and political director Lauren Ashburn is on site at tonight's presidential debate in Las Vegas. Lauren?
Brian, security is very tight with mounted police, Secret Service, multiple security checkpoints, and metal detectors as the media prepare for the rumble in the desert. Both campaigns have their surrogates out in full force, spinning polls and potential performance victories. Boris Epstein, a senior advisor with the Trump campaign, tells me that the Donald Trump we are going to see tonight is the Donald Trump who will be the next president of the United States. Now, no matter how persuasive Trump and Clinton are tonight, it is too late for them to win over some voters. More than 2 million people have already voted by mail or in person at early voting centers, and voting is underway right now in more than 30 states. Brian, coming up later, we are going to interview two people who can give us some must-dos and must-don'ts for the candidates, including what Trump has to accomplish with Hispanics and Hispanic Catholics. He is trailing in those votes. Back to you, Brian.
All right, Lauren, we'll check back with you shortly. Thank you. Meanwhile, other stories our News Nightly team is covering in today's world. NATO and the Afghan army investigating the killing of a U.S. service member and an American civilian on a military base in Kabul. A NATO statement says the attacker was wearing an Afghan army uniform and was later killed. That statement says another U.S. service member and 2 U.S. civilians who were wounded are in stable condition tonight. The victims were reportedly part of a NATO mission to train and advise Afghan security forces. A senior Iraqi general calls on ISIS to surrender the city of Mosul, now surrounded by security forces. Troops have already recaptured several villages near that city. Wyatt Goolsbee reports tonight.
Brian, Iraqi security forces and Kurdish fighters are now on the verge of liberating 2 historically Christian villages from ISIS. One is east of Mosul called Hamdaniya and another called Karakosh. But coalition forces are facing fierce resistance as they get closer and closer to Mosul. This body cam video gives you a sense of what it's like for soldiers on the front lines of the battle. It's from a Kurdish Peshmerga soldier fighting near Mosul. Bullets, mines, mortars, and bombs. Kurds and Iraqi security forces are facing it all in the war to take back the country's second largest city, which has been under ISIS control for 2 years. The Peshmerga are clearing numerous explosive devices, which litter the main road leading to Mosul from Erbil. Kurdish fighters say they also have to be careful when searching newly found ISIS tunnels in the area. They say militants leave booby traps everywhere.
There are no human rights violations at this point.
Iraq's prime minister says his government is doing everything it can to prevent potential human rights violations. International aid groups are scrambling to prepare for as many as 1 million civilians who might try to flee Mosul when fighting enters the city. This woman arrived at a refugee camp last week with her children. She says she has diabetes, but there was no way to get medicine in the ISIS-controlled city. They were under siege. She walked for 13 hours to escape, leaving her disabled son behind. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest says the U.S. is donating billions of dollars to help aid groups in Iraq.
The humanitarian situation in Mosul is already grave, and the potential for certain humanitarian contingencies should not be used as an excuse to put off undertaking this operation.
The Pentagon says about 4,800 U.S. troops are helping the military operation in Iraq, but they are not on the front lines. They are mostly serving as advisors and trainers. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsbee, thank you. The United States threatens to defeat North Korea with an overwhelming response if it uses nuclear weapons to attack America or its allies. Secretary of State John Kerry says the U.S. is deploying a THAAD missile defense system in South Korea China and Russia see this as a threat to their own defense. A Philippine police van rams protesters at an anti-U.S. rally Wednesday at the American Embassy in Manila. Warn you, some of these images are graphic. Video shows the van repeatedly ramming the protesters. Activists had surrounded it and started hitting the vehicle with batons they seized from police. The officer driving the van told reporters he was trying to get away from the protesters. The protest leader says at least 3 student activists were taken to a hospital. 23 protesters were arrested. The decision to open a McDonald's restaurant in a Vatican-owned property near St. Peter's Square meets with harsh criticism from cardinals who live in the building. It's being called McVatican, and it will be located literally around the corner from St. Peter's Basilica. Despite offers from different companies to lease the empty space, the Vatican decided to rent that property to McDonald's for 30,000 euros or about 33,000 US dollars a month. The Vatican official in charge of rolling out the project says that plan is moving forward. Alan Holdren, our Rome bureau chief for EWTN's Catholic News Agency, is with us. Alan, what are the cardinals who live in this area saying?
Well, Brian, we heard from one cardinal in particular. His name is Cardinal Elios Grecia. He spoke with a Republican newspaper here in Italy, saying that this is a disgrace. He called it a controversy and a perverse decision to allow something like McDonald's to be housed in a Vatican building. They are paying rent, obviously. It's 30,000 euros a month that McDonald's will pay to be in this building.
What's the Vatican's response to the criticism?
Well, there's another cardinal, Domenico Calcagno, who's in charge of managing the Vatican's properties outside of the Vatican city-state. He said that there will always be people who are for and against anything. He said that there's nothing wrong with this. It's not outside of legal possibilities. And he said that this was a decision made after they had studied other possibilities for use of that space.
So how close is this site to St. Peter's?
We're talking about 50 steps. You walk outside of the colonnade of St. Peter's, and it's just outside in a little square that's right beside what they call the St. Anne's Gate. If you've ever been here to Rome, walking up Borgo Pio, this will be the last block before you enter into that gate where the Swiss guards are standing watch. So it is fairly close enough that it's in a building where cardinals are actually in residence.
Yeah, it's right there. So with so much wonderful Italian cuisine in Italy, how popular can a McDonald's be?
Well, that's an interesting question, Brian, because here in Italy, the newer generations are more attracted to fast food. But I can't say, being married to an Italian, living here in this milieu, that many of the people who go to fast food restaurants are actually tourists. I don't think that the local restaurants will be in grave danger of shutting down. I know that a McDonald's that was really close to the Pantheon in the center of Rome actually closed down not too long ago. So one other thing about these fast food restaurants here in Rome is that they don't have just big signs out on the streets. They are fairly discreet. I would imagine that would also be the case there at the McDonald's. It's still in the beginning stages of the renovation. We haven't seen what their final signage will be.
An interesting controversy. Alan Holdren with the Catholic News Agency from Rome. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Brian.
And giving money to the poor is important, but true Christian charity requires a personal response.
Questa forma di carità è importante, ma forse non ci coinvolge direttamente.
The Holy Father reflects on the first corporal work of mercy, feeding the hungry, at today's audience. Pope Francis says we need to think about how we react when a poor person knocks on our door. He also cites his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI. He says feeding the hungry is an ethical imperative for the universal church and a duty for all Christians. An Italian graffiti artist known as Maupal created a mural depicting Pope Francis playing tic-tac-toe with peace signs. The street art appeared on the wall of a building in the Borgo neighborhood just outside the Vatican. It was quickly removed by local sanitation workers. Coming up, we go back to Las Vegas for pre-debate analysis. And a former ambassador to the Holy See offers Catholic perspective on tonight's final presidential debate. The North American martyrs St. Isaac, Jogues, St. John de Brebeuf, and companions are celebrated today by the church. The 17th century Jesuit missionaries brought the faith to the Iroquois, Huron, and other Native American tribes. They were ritually tortured and killed in what is now southern Ontario and upstate New York. Thanks for joining us this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and Donald Trump's campaign manager does not believe there is widespread voter fraud, as the candidate suggests. Kellyanne Conway does say some journalists are colluding with the Clinton campaign.
I think Hillary Clinton's scarcity is strategy. I get that, why they hide her for days before a debate. People don't want to be reminded how much they don't like her or they don't trust her.
Political director Lauren Ashburn is on site for tonight's presidential debate in Las Vegas. Jim Nicholson is joining us here in Washington, D.C., a former VA secretary, former ambassador to the Holy See, and Republican Party chairman. Jim, what's your take on this argument of rigged election? Isn't it really more of perhaps media bias than real fraud he's talking about?
It's a matter of semantics, I think. There's not widespread, pervasive voter fraud in our country. Our elections are generally pretty fair, but there are exceptions to that, and there seem to be in every election cycle. But I think what Mr. Trump's talking about is more the collusion that goes on between the press in this country and his opponent and his opponent's campaign. I mean, we've seen evidence in these emails that have been revealed where the campaign was allowed to review the questions that were going to be asked of the candidate by a so-called independent news agency in this country. And she got to review them and approve or deny some of them. That's collusion. Whether that's rigged or not, I don't know. But I think out there where the voters are in the communities, the elections are generally pretty darn honest and well conducted.
Well, Kellyanne Conway also urged the candidate to be focused tonight. And Lauren, I wonder if you think we're going to see a more focused Donald Trump.
Actually, this morning, she did say that there are problems when Donald Trump goes off message, and she has tried very hard to make sure that he stays on that message that is important, economy, immigration, all of that. But to the ambassador's point, as far as collusion is concerned, you know, we also reported yesterday that $300,000 came from journalists into the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now, they weren't political journalists, but they were journalists. And so it does speak to bias in the media against the Trump campaign.
And Jim, do you think that the Catholic bias that was revealed in these hacked emails will ever come up in tonight's debate?
It should. It's egregious. There should be an outrage. There should be an outrage in the Catholic community, including the Catholic hierarchy of the church, as far as I'm concerned, because it revealed clearly the attitude that these people in the Clinton campaign and the administration have about Catholics, that you know, they're adhering to some kind of a medieval dictatorship, and that it's sort of a cult, and they're not part of the modern progressive culture that they're trying to achieve for our society today, and they're sort of in the way and old-fashioned, you know, not accounting for the 2,000-year history of our church and the truth and the Gospels. It's disdainful, and it's outrageous. I hope it comes up, because it should.
All right, Lauren, is anybody talking about this out there in Las Vegas tonight?
Absolutely. There are discussions of it. And, you know, Cardinal Dolan did come out today and say John Podesta needs to distance himself from this campaign because of the emails of the Catholic focus that he has put together. And I think there is a lot of disgust among many different journalists here of different religions that one religion would be targeted like this. Brian.
All right, Lauren Ashburn in Las Vegas. Thank you, Lauren. And Ambassador Jim Nicholson here in Washington. Thanks so much, Ambassador. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Up next, how conservative Latinos view tonight's presidential debate, and some pro-life activists embrace the more negative anti-abortion label. On Wednesday, October the 19th, thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. We're just hours away from tonight's third and final presidential debate. We go back to Las Vegas and our political director, Lauren Ashburn. Lauren?
Brian, joining me now is Simon Marks, who's the president and chief correspondent with Feature Story News. He has covered politics for 25 years here in Washington. Welcome to the program,
Thanks.
Simon.
Good to be with you, Lauren.
Let's talk a little bit about the Hispanic vote, if we can. Hispanic Catholics, 77% for Clinton. Hispanics overall for Hillary Clinton. What does Donald Trump have to do tonight to help get some more Catholic or Hispanic votes?
Well, I mean, as with so many areas of the debate that we're going to see here tonight, this may be an insurmountable obstacle for him. If you look at the most recent numbers from just a few months ago, 33% of Hispanic voters were telling pollsters they were willing to think about supporting Trump. That number's down to 16%. You have here a Republican presidential candidate who has emerged from the whole process in 2012, where the party concluded that after Mitt Romney's defeat, what it really needed to do was to reach out to Latino voters, reach out to African American voters, and they've lost further ground. How does he turn that around? He has to sound reasoned and rational and not allow his temper to get the better of him, and not...
I think that's true on all issues.
On all issues,
right?
Not sound some of the cadences that we've heard so many times over the last few months. But at the end of the day, it's probably too little too late to make much of a difference.
What about the Clinton emails? I was talking to someone from the Washington Post who said that their phone number was in these Clinton emails, and they have been getting crank calls all day. These Clinton emails are a big source of discussion here.
They are. And, you know, to be fair to the Donald Trump supporters, there is frustration on the part of Donald Trump's team that the emails have not been attracting as much discussion and conversation, partly, of course, because of the difficulties that Donald Trump had after that Access Hollywood video leaked. But there are things in those Clinton emails that are worthy of attack by Donald Trump. And I think he comes here, despite where he finds himself in the polls now, with an opportunity to open up a couple of new lines of attack on Hillary Clinton, particularly with regard to that FBI document and the conversation about the alleged quid pro quo that was underway between the State Department and the FBI over that, and possibly also about the activity of Democratic campaign staffers trying to foment protests at Donald Trump rallies. But he's got to be very effective in landing those blows tonight, because for him this is the last chance saloon.
The last chance saloon, right in the middle of the desert, right? Good one. You know, the issue really comes down to tonight. Is this debate going to move the needle? Because you have Donald Trump right now not doing well in the polls, and it's his race to lose. You have Clinton actually putting money into traditionally Republican states.
Well, talk about Hispanic votes. Look at Arizona. 433,000 Latino voters registered to vote there. That's up 33,000 from 4 years ago. That would suggest that Hillary Clinton can grow her vote there and Donald Trump perhaps cannot. Even if the Democrats don't actually end up winning Arizona, the mere idea that you're sending Michelle Obama there to engage in campaigning sends a signal for the future. For Donald Trump at this point, if you want to know whether they themselves think this election is won or lost, just look at what's happening behind the scenes. The Trump campaign is not putting together a plan for government. They're talking about launching a TV network when this is over.
That's right.
That tells you where this is going.
That's right. Simon Marks, Feature Story News, thank you so much for joining us. Brian, it is 3 hours from the debate, 4 hours from the debate here. And of course, we will be covering that. We will be in the spin room after to find out how each candidate's surrogate thought that they did. And we're going to be coming to you tomorrow with all of that information. Back to you.
Thank you, Lauren Ashburn in Las Vegas. Aerial banners and jumbotrons are tools used in a unique campaign to get out the pro-life vote. The pro-life group Created Equal hopes to persuade voters in swing states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida to vote anti-abortion using graphic images of aborted babies. It targets college students and millennials. This week, the campaign visited Pittsburgh State College and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Mark Harrington, National Director of Created Equal, is Skyping with us from Harrisburg. Mark, why does your campaign use the phrase anti-abortion rather than the more positive pro-life?
What we've been finding is that the phrase pro-life has lost a lot of its meaning to many Americans. And there are a lot of people that identify themselves as pro-life, but that means different things to different people. A lot of people say they're pro-life for themselves, but they still believe a woman should have a right to abortion. That's why we're using anti-abortion.
So you consider yourself pro-life, and that anti-abortion has such a negative connotation. In fact, it's used in the mainstream media to sort of put down the pro-life movement. Are you concerned about that at all?
No, I think both phrases are fine. We're for life, but we're against the act of abortion, and we're using victim imagery. So we want people to look at those photos and say, I'm against that, and I'm going to vote against that.
Now, you display very graphic images of aborted babies. I wonder how that's received on college campuses.
Well, I mean, you're going to have people in the middle who are open to the debate, and then on both sides, you're going to have people for and against. We're trying to reach what's considered the mushy middle, and those people are generally open. These images start the conversation that's necessary. Abortion's an act of violence, and the photos show what abortion is and does.
So this is really an in-your-face sort of approach. I wonder how the younger generation receives that.
Well, they need a strong message, and it needs to be visually, because Americans learn visually more than they ever have before. They don't read to get their information. Therefore, we're trying to communicate a very complex message at a glance.
Mark, the presidential nominees have yet to debate abortion. Is it an issue that you think could really energize and galvanize voters?
Absolutely, and that's why we're in the battleground states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, raising the issue, trying to get this issue on the agenda for the presidential debates and for the presidential election, as well as the down ballot issues and the candidates there.
So you're there in Pennsylvania. Where do you go next?
Go to the battleground state of Ohio. We'll go to 3 cities, and then we'll go to Florida, where we'll visit 5 cities, ending in the Miami Beach, West Palm Beach area on Election Day.
You're working very hard at this. You're using jumbotrons. You're using aerial signs. Are you convinced that you can really make a difference here?
Absolutely. I mean, dollar for dollar, these airplane banners, the billboard truck signs, and the jumbotrons are more effective than almost any type of mass media type of marketing that we could use right now.
Mark Harrington, National Director of the pro-life advocacy group Created Equal, Skyping with us from Harrisburg. Mark, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for the EWTN News Nightly team. I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you this Wednesday evening with Pope Francis greeting pilgrims at today's general audience in St. Peter's Square. Good night. God bless.